I'll start. We'll go through the division winners first, and then obviously we have 3 wild cards as well. This one, maybe the easiest one for me to pick, NFC East. I got the Eagles coming out of it, who represented the NFC in the Super Bowl last year. I think they got the easiest path to get back there as well. I mean, I don't want to spoil my Super Bowl prediction here, but I think the Eagles very well could be back in the Super Bowl. Roster's just still so good. I know they lost some pieces. Obviously, they lost both coordinators, although I don't think that they're that upset, at least from people that I've talked to that are fans and cover the team, about the defensive coordinator leaving to become the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals. Obviously, lost Javon Hargrave, lost Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. They were able to retain both their corners, though, which I think was big for them because I didn't think that that was going to happen. Obviously, I think we talked about the Steelers draft. Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith, right off the bat for them, are going to pay huge dividends. And we'll see if we end up talking about either of those guys a little bit later on. But yeah, I got the Eagles winning the NFC East. What say you?
I have the same thing. I feel like that's the most obvious pick in, honestly, all of football. I just think that even though the NFC East, when you look at the NFC, is the most stacked division, I still feel like the Eagles are the easiest pick. I think that they have the best offense in the NFC. I think they have one of the most stout defenses. I mean, they practically have a Georgia defense. Georgia is the pipeline for Philly. So I think that the Eagles and Jalen Hurts, that's just such an easy pick for the NFC.
Yeah. Our cousins, maybe brothers of the NFC North. I got the Detroit Lions. I mentioned this, I feel like, a couple weeks ago when, for whatever reason, it somehow got brought up that I think they win this division by like 2 games. I'm buying in on the Detroit Lions. I really like the way that they finished last year. I felt like they were kind of the Steelers of the NFC last year with the way they finished. I think they also finished like 7-2 in their last 9. Missed the playoffs by 1 game. Came down to Seattle winning to get that last spot, even though Detroit beat Green Bay to give Seattle that spot, because if Green Bay would have beat Detroit, they would have gotten it. So Aaron Rodgers going out on a low note. Also love that. But yeah, I love what Detroit's really building there. And I think within that division, expecting Green Bay to take a step back. The Vikings, I think they have the offense. Don't know that they have the defense to compete for the division. So yeah, I got the Lions here winning this division.
I think the Vikings are your probably only true threat to the Lions in that division. And I also have the Lions winning the division. I think that Dan Campbell's doing great things in Detroit. He's building a really good team over the last couple seasons and continuing to grow on the seasons that he's had. So I think that I echo everything that you just said. And I love what they were doing. I like the first couple picks in this year's draft with Jahmyr Gibbs. Well, I like Jahmyr Gibbs as a player. I don't like where they picked him. But when I look at how he fits in Detroit's system, I do like what they're probably going to do with him. I love the Brian Branch pick. And I like Jack Campbell as well. So I think that Detroit is probably it's a toss-up between them and the Vikings, but I also have Detroit winning that division.
Well, and they also got Sam Laporta. So it's like you look at maybe the positional value, and it's not like great, but they've got like 4 or 5 guys that are going to start immediately for that football team within this draft class. So, I mean, I guess I get the line of thinking there, especially within that division. They feel like they're ready to go. NFC West, I'm going with the team the Steelers see week 1, the 49ers. Now, I think a lot of those things I mentioned about why I feel like it's the perfect recipe for the Steelers to win week 1. I think the 49ers are going to have answers to those as the season goes on. They're still clearly the best team in that division to me. All credit to the Seahawks, who obviously had Geno Smith do what he did last year and are a really good team. Can never really count out Pete Carroll. But I like the 49ers roster top to bottom. I think the biggest question is just, is Brock Purdy for real? And even if he's not in Kyle Shanahan's system, they don't ask too much of their quarterback. So assuming that, they get the Nick Bosa deal done at some point, assuming that George Kittle gets that groin right, I think that they're too talented of a roster. I got them winning their division.
Man, this is a boring segment so far because I have the exact same thing. I have the exact same thing. I do have the 49ers winning their division. And then look at the NFC West. They have 2 of the bottom 2 rosters in the entire National Football League in that division, with the exception of the Seahawks also being in that division. But I do think that Geno Smith is going to take a step back from what he was last season. And so I don't think that they're going to be able to keep up with what San Francisco is doing with Kyle Shanahan. Like you said, it doesn't matter really who's playing quarterback for San Francisco. They've got so many weapons offensively, and with that system, they'll just work it out. and they were able to get to a Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo. They were able to get to an NFC Championship with Brock Purdy. I have no lack of faith in Kyle Shanahan to be able to win this division again, even if it was with Brock Purdy.
All right, maybe we have a different one here. The winner of the NFC South. This one was tough for me, and I was between two teams. Ended up going with the team that I feel like has the better quarterback, at least right now. So I went with the New Orleans Saints to win this division. Derek Carr coming into town. Chris Olave, obviously one of the breakout stars from last year, really good rookie season. Maybe, just maybe, they get something from Michael Thomas this year. I don't know. I also look at the defensive side. Cam Jordan still going strong, even though he's in the twilight of his career. Demario Davis, really good linebacker. You got Marshawn Lattimore. So you get guys at all three levels of this defense. I just think, top to bottom, looking at these teams, I think it's only going to take like 8 or 9 wins, similarly to last year. And I think with what the Saints have, bringing Derek Carr into town, there's enough there to win that division.
We're not going to differ yet. It's because I also have the Saints.
Okay.
I think this is one of the worst divisions in football. It was really hard for me to pick a winner, and I just basically looked at what I thought the rosters had, and I thought that they could assemble. I thought the Saints could do that. Bringing in Derek Carr, I feel like Derek Carr is actually despite his suspension, I feel like bringing in Derek Carr could actually revive Alvin Kamara a little bit. Within the Saints offense, I feel like he hasn't been the same player since Drew Brees has retired. So maybe bringing in Derek Carr will be able to revive that a little bit. But I also, speaking of the running backs, I do like them bringing in Jamal Williams, not because I'm biased and a BYU guy, but I just feel like that is a good goal line guy to have. Scored a ton of touchdowns last year. It wasn't because of his long breaking runs. It's because whenever the Lions got in the goal line, that's who they were putting in. I like him. I also like their rookie, Kendrick Miller, out of TCU. I liked what he did last year in that national championship run, and then being able to come in and be like that third guy is whenever Kamara comes back. I feel like that's a good piece. And then you mentioned the other weapons that they have offensively. Hopefully Michael Thomas is able to revive his career a little bit and finally get back to maybe not what he did in 2019, but to a little bit closer to the receiver that he was when he was a slant god. So I do think that the Saints are going to win that division.
All right, now let's get some wild cards. Hopefully, at least we got one difference here. We'll see. I don't know that's going to come from this one because I got the Dallas Cowboys, who I think are very clearly the best non-division winning team in the NFC. Say what you want. I'm not necessarily picking them to make a deep playoff run or anything like that. But as far as what they're going to do in the regular season, I think they're very clearly a playoff team in the NFC. I love CeeDee Lamb. I think this is going to be a huge breakout year for him. And I think the addition of Brandon Cooks is only going to help him. Micah Parsons, maybe he'll get brought up later. One of the best, if not the best, overall defensive players in football. Trayvon Diggs, say what you want about him. He does give up a lot of yards. He's also going to take the ball the other way quite a bit. So I think there's some dudes on that defense too. DeMarcus Lawrence. And Dak Prescott's fine. Like, he doesn't turn the ball over nearly as much as he did last year. You look at his career, it looks like, at least right now, that was an outlier. I think that's fair to say with all the years that he had where he wasn't turning the ball over. Now, if he does it again this year, then maybe you can say it's becoming a trend. But as far as we're sitting here right now, I think last year was just an anomaly, and I'm expecting him to get back to that guy that always throws less than 10 picks.
I also have the Cowboys. We're not going to differ there. I echo all the reasons you said, and other guys that they brought in, like Brandon Cooks. I think that's a good wide receiver 3 for Dallas to have behind CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup. And Tony Pollard finally gets to be the guy in that backfield, which I think he's going to excel in this offense as the sole back. So yeah, they're the best roster that is going to be a wild card team in the NFC.
I think once again, similar to last year, we did 3 NFC East teams because I got the Giants. Brian Daboll, love what he did last year. Love what he did last year.
Oh, man.
I don't see a reason to think that they're not going to be at least the exact same team. And I think Saquon, another year, he's playing for a contract, whether that's with the Giants or somebody else. They bring in Darren Waller via trade. He seems rejuvenated and ready to rock and roll after not ending on the best of terms with the Raiders. And I look at that roster top to bottom. I'm trying to figure out who else is pushing for that. But I think that Brian Daboll, serious coach of the year candidate last year with what he did with that team. And that's the thing. I mentioned top to bottom of the roster, but it's not like comparatively they are a great roster. I think they're good enough. I respect that coaching staff that much. Him, Mike Kafka, Wink Martindale on the defensive side. I think they really got things rolling. I still think they need to add some more juice for sure, but I think they're in a spot to at least make the playoffs for right now.
And as do I, as you can tell by me
Yeah.
laughing as soon as you said the Giants. I think
there's only two teams I think that could possibly be the 7th seed, so we'll see.
Okay, so I also thought that too, but I do like the Giants. I think that they're vastly improved defensively over the last couple of years. You know, the one position that it seems funny to me when I think of like how good is the Giants going to be, like who is Daniel Jones going to throw the ball to? Because when I look at their wide receiver room, I'm just kind of like meh. Like you look at their starters, like at least listed on their depth chart, it's Darius Slayton, Paris Campbell, Isaiah Hodgins, and then you have Jalen Hyatt, rookie, Wan'Dale Robinson out of Kentucky, and Sterling Shepard, who's been there for. He's going to have like a 100-yard game at some point this season for some reason. But outside, they also added in Darren Waller too, so that's an improvement to tight end. But as far as their receivers goes, I feel like it's funny that I'm talking about this team as a wild card team, seeing like what the weapons they have offensively outside of Saquon and then probably Darren Waller as well. But I think that speaks to how much their defense has improved, and I feel like that's the strength of this team, definitely. But yeah, I think that they're one of my wild card teams as well. So it's down to team 7 if we're going to have any disparity whatsoever.
So the NFL is a QB-driven league, and that's what it came down to for this 7th team for me. Because I think there was 3. Actually, I said 2. I think there was 3 possible teams that this could have been. It could have been the Packers if Jordan Love is for real. It could have been the Seahawks, who were there last year, and we talked about Geno Smith. I don't think that you can ever count out Pete Carroll. Or it could be the team that I picked in the Minnesota Vikings to be the 7th seed. With Kirk Cousins.
We have the exact same. And I'm not even kidding. Like I for those on the YouTube, I don't want to like spoil anything on my stuff, but like all my teams are right there.
Okay. Yeah, now you can see it. And the thing is too, so breaking the fourth wall here, I had mine done in advance. Tyler did his before we started recording, so we didn't talk about what either of us were picking here. But yeah, I looked at the Vikings, Kirk Cousins, Justin Jefferson. That to me is going to be the deciding factor between them and the next team. So I think even while I love the addition of Brian Flores, I don't think there's necessarily enough talent on the defense for them to even be close to league average just yet. I think the offense is going to carry them. I'm a huge fan of Kevin O'Connell. I think Kirk Cousins is going to put up numbers. Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, I think has a great chance to thrive as a rookie, as good a chance as anybody else around the league, just because of playing across from Justin Jefferson. KJ Osborne's a nice weapon. They just paid TJ Hawkinson, so he better be a big part of that offense too. So
I'm a big fan of Alexander Madison as well. So
I would just say, yeah, he's getting his first crack as like a 3-down guy, a guy that's always been like a fantasy football hero in weeks where Dalvin Cook is out.
I have him in our dynasty league, so we'll see how he does. Also, thoughts? Let me know in the comments. Should I tank for Caleb Williams? My team's kind of mid. I don't have a QB. My QB2 is Sam Howell, so let me know.
Anything else to add as to why you picked the Vikings as opposed to the Seahawks or Packers or anybody else?
Specifically, the teams that I was looking at were the Seahawks and the Vikings. I picked the Vikings, because I feel like Kirk Cousins, we know who Kirk Cousins was last year an anomaly for Geno Smith. I literally just said that I think he's going to have a regression from what he did last season. It's not that I think the Seahawks are going to be a bad team. I think they might just miss by like a game, but I just believe in what offensively the Vikings have going on with Kirk Cousins. They have the best fantasy football receiver and arguably the best receiver in football in Justin Jefferson. You're adding Jordan Addison amongst other weapons like TJ Hawkinson, KJ Osborne. I feel like that's a good enough roster offensively where that offense can carry them to that 7th wildcard spot.
I will say the one thing that kind of scares me about that pick and not going with Seattle, we mentioned how bad that division was with the top. Like you almost feel like they're gifted 4 wins between the Cardinals and Rams.
That's true. That's a good point.
Seahawks. So we'll see. But yeah, I'm going with the Vikings. All right, let's switch gears, go to the AFC. I feel like we got to save the AFC North for last. So we'll start with the AFC West, where it's been the Chiefs division. Is it still going to be? Yeah, it's still going to be because they have Patrick Mahomes. We'll see how many, if at all Travis Kelce misses any games with the hyperextended knee. That just came out today. But like to me, it just until they don't win that division, they're going to win it every single year that they have Patrick Mahomes. It doesn't even matter what the rest of the roster looks like. Though I do think that they've done some good things and the roster's okay. It's nowhere close to where it was when Patrick Mahomes first came there. He's at this point carrying the entire team on his shoulders. But yeah, I too hard to not pick them to just run it back in the West again.
Yeah, and I agree wholeheartedly. I think that the only question mark I'll have eventually is like, all right, whenever Travis Kelce hangs him up and Mahomes is literally surrounded by a bunch of who's, then will they win the division? And I still think I'll pick them to win the division until they don't.
Yeah.
But I mean, honestly, looking at the roster, you have who's wide receiver one? Sky Moore or Marquez Valdez-Scantling?
Like if Valdez-Scantling is going to play like he did in the playoffs last year, probably him.
True.
But
I
true. Think that they have very high hopes for Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney full season there, and even Justin Ross, who was, because of medical stuff, kind of just fell into their lap. I think he's a guy to watch too, because it was certainly not for a lack of talent that he fell into their lap.
Yeah, but
either so, I mean, those aren't guys that you're talking about as a number one literally anywhere else. Like,
yeah, I was talking. I touched on how the Eagles are the easiest pick to say to win their division in the NFC. The Chiefs are the easiest pick to say to win their division in the NFL. Until further notice, that I feel like that is the case.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to disagree with that, though I had a very easy time picking this one. The AFC South, I'm going with the Jacksonville Jaguars, who won it last year. I don't think it's going to be nearly as close as last year, how they win it this year. I think that I think this is the year they cement themselves amongst the upper echelon teams of the AFC. Expecting Trevor Lawrence to take another leap. Love Doug Peterson and what he's brought to that team. Like, Philly's obviously done fine. You look at, they just got to the Super Bowl last year with Nick Sirianni. That's great for them. But man, I feel like Doug Peterson was kind of done dirty in Philly. So I'm glad to see him have another shot here and succeeding in Jacksonville. Getting Calvin Ridley, we'll see how much juice he still has. I would bet on him having a pretty nice season there in Jacksonville. They bring back Evan Ingram, and I just like the roster they're building in Jacksonville. So,
what are you smirking at?
Because I said I would bet on Calvin Ridley having a nice season.
Oh,
Calvin Ridley was suspended for
that was a good one. Yeah.
I stuck in a little Easter egg there for people.
Yeah, he's betting on himself. I think that I agree. I mean, I definitely agree. That's who I picked.
We're gonna have some differences here in the AFC. I'm willing to bet that as well.
Probably. But I did pick the Jags. I feel like this is an easy pick in that division. Yeah. Trevor Lawrence, he took a big leap in year 2. I feel like he's going to grow on that in year 3, especially with getting with Calvin Ridley into the fold. I like the roster a lot, especially compared to their peers within that division. It is one of the better rosters in that division. And so, yeah, I think the Jags are the easy pick.
AFC East could have a difference here because one of these teams is getting a lot of hype, but I'm still going with the Bills to win this division. Again, it's kind of looking at it the same way. I'm not going to say the exact same way as the Chiefs, but like Josh Allen is unbelievable. And I think that he is capable of winning this division, not on his own, but I think the team's good enough. But they still should be the favorites to me. Like, until I see the Jets knock them off, I'm not willing to go there with them yet. So I'm excited about this Bills team. Now, will they make noise in the playoffs? That's the thing. Like, getting to the playoffs is not going to be enough anymore. They need to make a deep playoff run. The time is now for them, or we're really going to start having some conversations about the Bills.
I too am picking the Bills, and I will say I'm not buying into the hype with the Jets. I'm just not. And I feel like that is in part to Aaron Rodgers in New York. Like, this dude won back-to-back MVPs a couple years ago. Packers were still mid in the playoffs. They didn't do anything. So why am I buying into the hype that it's suddenly going to change in New York? I understand he has got some nice weapons, like he has Garrett Wilson. Breece Hall's coming off of an ACL, so how much do I trust that running back room? I think that the Jets are going to be a solid team. I think they're definitely going to be improved off of what they were with Aaron Rodgers. but I'm just not ready to buy into the hype just because you added one player. Granted, it is a big player, but it's all of your hype is basically being hung on the head of one player.
Yeah. All right, and then the AFC North. This is going to be the tough one. I'm going with the Bengals to win the division still. I got to see that. Somebody said, like, every team in the division has kind of had like these 2-year runs, and the Bengals have obviously won the division now 2 years in a row. So theoretically, it shouldn't be them that win the division. I know there was some turnover in the safety room on the back end of that defense, but like top to bottom, they still got the best roster in the AFC North, in my opinion. And they got the best quarterback in the division, in my opinion, in Joe Burrow. And we talked about it a couple weeks ago, where it's like not even because of any elite physical traits that he has. He might be the best quick processor in the game right now, and that includes Patrick Mahomes. I think Burrow processes a little bit better. So I think for me, it's still the Bengals division right now until it's not.
Our first difference. It finally happened. What? 7-3. This is our 11th pick of a team for the playoffs this season. And I am picking your Pittsburgh Steelers to win the division. We talked about, am I buying into the hype, or are we buying into the hype of the Steelers? I feel like this is obviously a yes. But I also look at the season that they have, like the schedule that they have. I feel like the teams that they're playing, especially in the middle and later half of the season, outside of the division opponents, I feel like they tend to be easier games. I like the home games that they have. Like I am really buying into not just the Steelers roster itself and how they play, but when you include the schedule that they have, I am going to buy in to the Steelers winning this division. Maybe that is a little hometown bias in me, but I do like what I see on the field, but also in the future of what we have to play.
I feel like one of us had to do it, so there it is. First wild card. Now's the time for me to say your Pittsburgh Steelers. I still think they're a playoff team. Like I think that they're right there with the Bengals. I think they're going to compete for the division. I just lean the Bengals down the stretch, even though I think the Steelers could get off to the better start between the two. I like the Steelers to win 10 plus games this year, and I think that comfortably is going to be a playoff team just because of how competitive the AFC is going to be. I think a lot of teams are going to be within like that 9 to 10, 8, 9, 10 mix. I think the Steelers, top to bottom, Kenny Pickett takes a leap. George Pickens takes another leap. Deontay Johnson scores a few touchdowns this year. The offensive line is improved. I think that the defensive line is going to really make life hell for people. I'm in a good place with where this roster is. But again, it all depends on the quarterback. Like if they have everything else go right, but that doesn't, we're having a different conversation. But I think it's going to go right, at least for the most part. I think he takes a big leap in year 2.
He showed us nothing to give us any doubts, at least going into the season. So I agree. My wild card one, I mean, we basically flipped. My wild card one is the Bengals. For the reasons you were saying about the Steelers. I think that they have, and I'd still say I agree with you. Like I think they, especially offensively, they have the best roster in the AFC North. I think that I would pick them to finish second in probably by a game. I feel like that it's going to be close down to the wire who's going to win this division. And I love Joe Burrow a lot. Like I love that guy as a quarterback. And yeah, I think that he's going to be one of the best quarterbacks again in the National Football League. But despite that, I still like the Steelers over them to win the division. So that's why I'm picking them as wild card one.
My wild card 2. These last two are both tough. And the reason that I actually picked, I think the 7 might be a better team than the 6, but because of the division that the 7th team is in, it's going to be harder for them to win more games than the 6th. I'm going the Chargers as 6. And I don't know, until they make any type of noise in the playoffs, especially after their collapse last year, I can't buy into it. I almost think that they have like a weird curse to them. They're kind of like, I'm not saying they're there yet. They kind of remind me of like the Cowboys of the AFC. But Justin Herbert, very much an elite quarterback. Austin Eckler still on that roster. Mike Williams, Keenan Allen hopefully stays healthy. They added Quentin Johnston, who I don't necessarily love, but within that offense, I think is really good. Rashawn Slater coming back off an injury. Defensively, we'll see. I mean, Derwin James has to stay on the football field. He's one of the best safeties in football when he's out there. Joey Bosa and Mac up front. They brought in Eric Kendricks from Minnesota, who his best years are probably behind him, but still okay. And who was the corner that J.C. Jackson they paid last year, and he missed most of the year. I think he got hurt in like week 1 or 2 or something like that. So we'll see if what happens with him. He got like $85 million in free agency. Yikes! But yeah, I think the Chargers are a playoff team, and I say that somewhat hesitantly, but I really think it's about Herbert carrying them that far.
I also have the Chargers as my wild card 6.
Oh wow, okay.
I do. I like the weapons that they have offensively. I think I don't really have any worries about them offensively. I think that they'll be able to do some good things this season. The defense, that's where I have some more question marks. And I know that the Chargers had a lot of hype. I feel, was it last season going into it saying that they were going to win the division? And then it ended up being the Chiefs again. I still think there's some hype to them in the sense that like they're a good team and they're a playoff team, but I'm not going to pick them to win their division. I'm not even close to that, but I still think that they're going to be solid. I like Justin Herbert a lot. And for more than just fantasy purposes, I do think he is a really good quarterback. And so I have them finishing second in the division, but finishing as the second wild card as well.
All right, and then this last spot for me, there's a ton of teams in the mix, in my opinion here. You got the Jets, who we mentioned earlier. You got the Ravens. You got the Browns, I would say, as well. Very good roster. Say what you want about the Browns, but like roster-wise, probably top 12-ish in the entire league. You got the Dolphins. Tua stays healthy. Look at what they did last year when Tua was on the field. I don't know if there's anybody else that I'd throw in that mix. I know some people are throwing the Broncos in there, and it's really just because of Sean Payton. Like, I mean, his body.
You're really hoping Russell Wilson turns it around.
Yeah. So I would say that probably ends the teams that I would even somewhat think about. I know some people still believe the Titans because of Vrabel, and like I get it. That's given him a ton of credit as a coach, and he is awesome, but I can't see it with that roster. I went with the Ravens. And I think that they are better than the Chargers, but that's why I have them as 7 instead of 6, because I think wins are going to be a little bit tougher to come by in the AFC North and the AFC West. So the Ravens with Todd Monken coming in, I've talked about it a ton. I think Lamar can very much compete to win a second MVP within this offense. I think that we're going to see a totally different version of Lamar Jackson where people are going to be like, oh, yeah, he can throw. Remember the guy that threw 37 touchdown passes in 2018? Yeah, there he is again. Mark Andrews is in line for a big season. Love Zay Flowers coming into the draft and don't love the landing spot, but within that offense, I think he's going to excel. We'll see if there's any gas left in OBJ's tank, but I don't really think that matters. And defensively, they're one of those defenses where it doesn't even like matter what the personnel is. Like Harbaugh just finds a way, similarly to Mike Tomlin, to get results. So I got the Ravens taking the final spot.
We have only one difference, and it's the fact that we have different AFC North.
I really thought you were going to go with the Jets.
No, and did I hurt those chances a little bit when I said I'm not buying into them earlier?
At least your thought process. At first, but then you said you still think they're going to be like okay. You just don't know that they're going to excel in the play or what they're doing to do in the playoffs because of Rodgers' playoff history. So I thought, okay, he'll pick them to go into the playoffs, but that's like the 7th seed.
No, legitimately, I do have the Ravens. And part of that is because I feel like they're still one of the better teams, not just in the AFC North, but in the AFC in general. It's hard to really have a bad team in the AFC North when you really look at it, especially looking at the rosters. And then that's part of the reason, like you were saying, like because of the division they're in, the wins are going to be harder to come by. It's going to be more competitive. And so I still think they're going to squeak into the playoffs, but they're going to be the 3rd team in the division. But I mean, you're talking about a division where you could order those 1 through 4, and I could at least listen to it in either way. Like maybe not the Browns finishing first, but you know what I mean. Like it is that competitive out of a division, and I feel like it's up in the air between the NFC East and the AFC North for what is the best division, what's the deepest division in football.
What's funny is I said the only thing that I can't see like standings wise is the Bengals finishing 4th. Any other way that you can put them, because you said about the Brown, I could see a world where the Browns finish first. I don't want to see that world. I think it's very unlikely. But like if Deshaun Watson it does get back to like 2020 version of himself, I think it's possible with that roster. So, yeah. But there it is. We had the same teams, just division winner in the AFC North different. So that is really weird. All right, award time. We will start with we're gonna have the same comeback player of the year. Like DeMar Hamlin, step on the football field, the award's yours. Don't even know why we gotta do this whole song and dance, but I'm assuming you got the same.
I do. It is DeMar Hamlin. After everything that happened last year with that whole incident, I mean, it's the obvious pick.
Yeah, don't need to spend too much time on it. Coach of the year. I mentioned this coach earlier. Doug Peterson is my coach of the year. I think the Jaguars are going to put themselves in that upper echelon of the AFC. So I got him as the coach of the year.
I'm going to say Dan Campbell. And I think that winning the division, that's a big step from where he took over this team to what he's building them into. I think that he's in for a big year in Detroit. And so I think that him winning the division with that roster and from where he took it to where they are now, I think that he's going to win it.
I really struggled with defensive player, I should say. And the reason being, I was going back and looking, is it typically guys that play edge or corner? I feel like those are the two logical spots to look at. You look at last year with Sauce Gardner, was a corner. Aiden Hutchinson very much in the mix, though. So I was down between two players, and I think for a second straight year, it's a corner. Devon Witherspoon of the Seattle Seahawks is my pick. I think people are going to be throwing his way because of what Tariq Woolen showed in year one and his ability to take the ball the other way. And I think because of that, Devon Witherspoon is going to have a chance to have a very similar productive year as to what Tariq Woolen did in his rookie season.
So I actually went away from both of those positions. This is where I said before we started recording, I had some, I think, fun names in some of these picks. I'm picking Jack Campbell, another Detroit Lion. I think that he's going to be a big part, especially as the season progresses in the middle of that defense. Inside linebacker, sure, they may not get the flashiness of a corner or an edge player, but I feel like he is going to get the production. He's the best corner, at least in our opinions, going into this draft, and I like the pick for Detroit. So yeah, I had a tough time struggling because I was like, who is actually going to play among some of these rookies, at least play enough to win this award? And so I looked at him and was like, let's just throw it on the wall. I like Jack Campbell coming out of college. I think that he could see enough volume of snaps where it could be easily his.
Yeah, like Christian Gonzalez was kind of on my mind for the Patriots. The other one that I considered, but I don't know how much he's going to play, is Will McDonald with the Jets. I really like that fit. So didn't end up doing it, obviously. But okay, offensive rookie of the year. I said before we started recording, I thought we could have same one. This to me was going to be the same one if there was going to be one. Bijan Robinson.
Yeah.
I just think, I mean, you take a running back where they took him, he's going to get the ball more than anybody else. And I think within that system, while I'm not high on the Falcons as a whole, I think he's in line to have a monster season. So apologies to your boy Tyler Algier, but I think Bijan Robinson is going to be commanding so much within that offense.
I agree, and that's why I'm picking him as well. And I will say, I'll echo everything you said, but I'll also say part of me is picking Bijan not just because of the position he's playing, but I look at the other main position that would win this award in quarterbacks, and I don't really trust year one of Stroud, Young, or Anthony Richardson to really excel to the point where they're going to be better than Bijan is going to look. While the positional value of a quarterback would be higher to pick, I feel like how much volume Bijan is going to get in this offense is going to be the clear-cut winner.
Well, last year was a receiver, Garrett Wilson. So I considered receivers too. There's not one for me. Like Jackson Smith and Jigba's coming into the season dealing with a wrist injury. I mentioned Jordan
Justin Jefferson.
I mentioned that I thought like he was in a good spot, but yeah, I still can't see it.
I think he's a good spot for where he's playing in his career, but I don't think he's a good spot to win a type of award like that.
Yeah. Offensive player of the year last year, Justin Jefferson. who we just mentioned, won the award. I'm sticking with the position, and I'm coming within the AFC North to Jamar Chase to win Offensive Player of the Year. Unfortunately, I think it's time for him to really be that guy and seen in that way. It's funny because remember his rookie year training camp or whatever, he was having like issues with drops and stuff like that.
Yeah.
We were like, oh no. And also, I mean, I think that especially like with Burrow getting hurt the year before and the offensive line issues they had down the stretch, I don't think it was with no credence that people were talking about they shouldn't have drafted Jamar Chase and should have taken like Panay Sewell or somebody like that. But that was a big conversation too. But Jamar Chase has turned into an absolute superstar, one of the, I don't know, 3-4 best at his position in the entire league. And I think within the structure, that offense is really due to blow up this year. So he's my pick for Offensive Player of the Year.
I'm sticking with the position, but I'm shifting to the AFC East. I'm going with Tyreek Hill. I think that despite me not picking them as a playoff team, I think he is going to have such a huge offensive production year, despite the team not being as good as what some people may hope. I feel like he is poised to have another 1,800 plus yard season, and even with Jalen Waddle there, I still feel like he gets his anytime he gets the ball in his hands. I feel like it's going to be a 50-yard reception. He just has that vibe about him when I watch him play. But yeah, I'm going with receiver as well, just different player.
That brings us to Defensive Player of the Year. I got Micah Parsons. I just think he does way too much within that Dallas defense. He's going to pile up the sacks. He's also going to force some fumbles, probably have a pick or two, ton of tackles, like just does so much. And I think the most versatile chess piece on defense that we have in this league. So Micah Parsons is my guy.
I'm going with an AFC guy. I'm actually going with the Defensive Rookie of the Year last year. I'm going with Sauce Gardner.
Wow. To go from Defensive Rookie of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, that's what a 2-year run.
Yeah. I think that he was great last year. I think he's going to get even more interceptions than what he did last year. I think he only had the 2 last year. I'm predicting this dude's going to have like 9 on the season. So I'm thinking high volume of interceptions, a very big splash play guy. He's going to be a lockdown corner in New York. I'm not going to say he's another Revis Island, but they have another lockdown corner up in New York. Or I guess I shouldn't say New Jersey. Neither of those teams actually play in New York.
I like it. And finally, MVP, where I actually made a video about this on my personal channel. So if you've seen that already, I'm not spoiling anything here, but I have a bet on this as well. I got Doug Peterson winning Coach of the Year. I got his quarterback, Trevor Lawrence, winning MVP.
You've got to be kidding me. That is exactly who I have. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I think when you look at the Jaguars, if they are going to go to the places that I think they're going to go to, I think it's going to be on the back of Trevor Lawrence. And I think that he took a massive step in year 2. And I think he's going to be even better in year 3 when you talk about some of the additions they've made within that offense, with Calvin Ridley getting him a tackle and Anton Harrison. We'll see how early he gets on the field. Travis Etienne. I'll tell you what, I kind of like the other back they got there too, and Tank Bigsby. I think he's going to play a nice role for them and be what they wanted James Robinson to be, complementing Etienne. So Christian Kirk, nice year. Zay Jones is a good player. Evan Ingram's back in the fold as well, getting extended there. I think, Doug Peterson is your coach. I think Trevor Lawrence has all the ingredients there to have a massive year. So I got Trevor Lawrence.
I agree. I mean, I think that when you look at the additions of Calvin Ridley and then what they already had offensively that they're bringing back, you mentioned Evan Ingram. I think that he could be due for another big year, because he saw a little bit of a revival, at least with his statistics of what he was able to do from his last year in New York to what his first year in Jacksonville was. I think Trevor Lawrence is looking for a huge year, like 4,500 plus yards. And yeah, I agree. I also have him as an MVP. If this says anything, this just shows that we've been doing this show a long time, and we tend to think a lot of the same ways. Not always. Well, there was some.
If you had to say somebody else, who would you say?
Lamar Jackson.
I mean, I mentioned when I was talking about him, I think he could have like a similar 2018. In my head, I was between Lawrence, Lamar Jackson, and Jalen Hurts.
Wait,
That's the three that I'm because I feel like there's going to be voter fatigue with Mahomes.
Yeah.
And I think he's going to still be within that conversation.
Like Mahomes would have to do something, I feel like, astronomically big. Like, I don't even know what he could do. Throw for 6,000 yards? Like,
yeah.
He'd have, like, and he very may well win it. Like, don't get me wrong. But
yeah,
I feel like other people are going to improve drastically compared to what Mahomes has already been doing year in and year out.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, this was a longer episode. We got a lot of predictions in there, but last thing before we get out of here, Super Bowl. Who do we got?
Not a huge. I don't really have much of an explanation for this. I am going Chiefs from the AFC. It's listen. I want to say Steelers. I want to even just say someone different for fun, but it's hard to pick against the Chiefs whenever they're in the AFC. But what I will say is I am picking probably a very sleeper pick, and I'm picking the New York Giants. I think they are going to find a way into the Super Bowl.
Wow. Okay. All right. Well, you don't have to worry about us having the same thing there.
Yeah.
I got the Eagles representing the NFC, as I kind of alluded to earlier. I think they're in a great spot to just run it back. From the AFC, it's a little bit tougher. I think there's a conversation between like 4 teams who it could be, and it's hard not to just say the Chiefs, like you said. But I don't love the idea that already Travis Kelce's dealing with an injury. I'm not saying it's going to lead to anything bigger down the stretch or that Mahomes can't carry them, even if something does happen. Look at Mahomes won the Super Bowl last year on one leg, basically. So because of his ankle. But I'm going to say that finally some of these questions that we've had about them in the playoffs get answered. I'm going Eagles and Bills in the Super Bowl.
Bills finally make it. Bills finally get that deep run that you were talking about.
But they still don't win because the Eagles are going to beat them in the Super Bowl.
Man, I just got to say, like, I don't know what it was, but this is going to sound so dumb, but I'm just like, the Giants are due. I mean, they won a couple with Eli. They're due, and I feel like
listen.
I have no logical reason. If you want actual analytical reasoning as to why I'm picking them, I have none. I'm just, but that's the thing. When it comes to the playoffs, it's silly season and weird stuff happens. So I
mean, if it happens, you might be the only person that includes any New York Giants fan that has this. So,
and I'm on record. This is going to be on YouTube. This is going to be on Spotify. On record, New York Giants in the Super Bowl.
All right. Well, let's get out of here. As Tyler